My name is Kesha, and I'm 32 years old, working as a history educator in a high school. My sibling, Monique, consistently viewed me as the black sheep of the family. She extended an invitation to her extravagant engagement celebration, but my spouse, Malik, and I were not initially included on the primary guest roster. We were instead assigned a table adjacent to the kitchen's entry, positioned behind a wilting floral display. My sister approached, her tone laced with an overt sense of pity. Keisha, she began, I simply wished to prevent you and your husband from feeling uncomfortable in the company of my fiancé's affluent associates. She was entirely unaware that her fiancé was actively seeking an audience with my seemingly unassuming husband, and that my husband held the unique ability to completely dismantle her fiancé's future prospects. Before I delve further into this narrative, please share your current location in the comments below. If you've ever experienced being dismissed or undervalued by your own family, please tap the like and subscribe buttons. The grand ballroom at the St. Regis Atlanta was alive with vibrant energy. Shimmering crystal chandeliers cascaded from the high ceiling, while a string quartet provided a gentle melody, and impeccably dressed waiters offered champagne. However, this opulent spectacle was not for Malik and me. We were being led by a meticulous event planner down a narrow, linoleum-floored corridor, the festive sounds of the party gradually receding. The sharp aroma of industrial cleaner mingled with the scent of steamed fish striking my senses. "Excuse me," I inquired, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where exactly are you escorting us?" The planner, a woman with her hair pulled back in a severe blonde bun and a clipboard in hand, continued without pause. She nudged open a swinging door. "Here you are." It was not a corridor, but a service entrance, discreetly tucked away behind an imposing, desiccated floral arrangement and situated directly beside the cacophonous bustle of the main kitchen, sat a small, forlorn table. It was set for two, a wobbly card table draped with a mere paper napkin. The chairs themselves were mismatched. With unnerving regularity, the kitchen door would burst open, inundating us with waves of heat and the jarring clang of cookware. "This cannot be correct," I stated, my voice quivering. "I am Kesha, the bride's sister." The planner finally turned her gaze toward me, her expression flat and utterly dismissive. "This is not an error. Miss Monique specifically requested a discreet seating arrangement for you and your husband." She underscored the word discreet, as if bestowing a significant favor. I stood there, mortified. My husband Malik calmly drew out the rickety chair for me. "Kesha," he said softly, his tone reassuring, "let's sit. I'm curious to observe how this unfolds." I clutched my purse, my face flushing with embarrassment. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Our names are Keisha and Malik Jefferson." The planner let out a sigh, tapping her clipboard. "I am aware of who you are, the educator and the data specialist. Miss Monique was quite explicit. The main ballroom is reserved for her fiancé's investors and esteemed guests." The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. We were not considered esteemed. I sat down, attempting to compose myself and suppress the sting of humiliation. This was my sister's engagement party, and this was her designated place for me. Just as I was contemplating how to disappear into my seat, I saw her. My sister Monique glided towards us, a vision in a shimmering emerald gown that I knew cost more than my last 2 salaries combined. Beside her, her fiancé, Trevor Hayes, appeared as if he had stepped from the pages of GQ, clad in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit. They weren't approaching to rectify a mistake. They were coming to assess the damage. "Oh, Kesha," she exclaimed, her voice a high-pitched, syrupy sweetness, the precise tone she adopted just before delivering an insult. "You've found your little spot. Isn't it just perfect? I simply knew you and Malik wouldn't feel entirely at ease in the main ballroom. It's all rather intense in there." She gestured with a hand adorned with sparkling diamonds towards the main festivities. "We couldn't even see. Trevor's guests, you understand? They're all Silicon Valley investors and major industry partners. We're talking about the heads of venture capital firms, individuals who hold the power to determine the fate of entire corporations." I watched as Trevor's attention finally settled upon us. He didn't even acknowledge me. His gaze swept over Malik, taking in his unpretentious dark suit. It was a fine suit, certainly, but devoid of any discernible brand. Malik wore it with an effortless confidence, sans tie. A faint sneer of pure disdain flickered across Trevor's lips. "Hi," he uttered, the word clipped and dismissive. He then turned his back to us entirely, pulling out his phone as if we were no longer worthy of his attention. Monique leaned in, her voice dropping to a confidential, almost commiserating whisper. "I just felt it would be awkward for you two to engage in superficial conversation. You know, you wouldn't quite know what to say to them, and they most certainly wouldn't know what to say to you." She emitted a light, airy laugh, intended to sound considerate, but landing like a stinging slap. "It would simply be embarrassing for everyone involved. This way, you can enjoy your meal in peace. It's much more intimate, don't you think?" The condescension was so palpable I felt as though I was suffocating. She was treating us like misbehaving children, unsuitable for the adult table. I looked to Malik, anticipating a reflection of my own humiliation. Instead, he appeared merely amused. He calmly placed his paper napkin on his lap, offered me a warm smile, and remarked, "It is indeed private, my dear. Exceptionally secluded." Monique glided away, evidently satisfied with her performance, leaving me to stew in my indignation. Before I could utter a word to Malik, another figure materialized. It was my mother, Denise. Her face was set in that familiar, stern expression she reserved exclusively for me. She wasn't here to offer solace. She was here to manage me. "Kesha," she hissed, her voice low and urgent. "I just observed you speaking with the planner. I sincerely hope you weren't creating any difficulties for her. You need to comprehend the significance of today." I stared at her, perplexed. "Mom." She gestured dismissively, as if warding off an irritating insect. "And where else were you expected to sit? You must be practical. This is not one of your little school functions. This is important." She leaned closer, her eyes scanning the main room. "Your sister is marrying a CEO, a genuine CEO. Trevor Hayes. Do you grasp the implications of that for this family? This celebration is about Monique solidifying her future, her social standing. We cannot have you and your husband." She paused, searching for the appropriate terminology. "You are an educator and Malik holds an office position. It is entirely appropriate for you to be seated here. It's peaceful. Simply enjoy your meal and refrain from causing a scene." I was utterly dumbfounded, an office worker. The description felt so reductive, so contemptuous, it stole my breath. It was a chilling echo of a conversation from the previous Christmas, following Monique and Trevor's engagement. I recalled my mother's giddy demeanor as she boasted to my aunts on the telephone. "Oh, Monique has done so exceptionally well," she had gushed. "A true CEO. And poor Keisha. Well, she's sweet, but she married some low-level data analyst. What a pity!" She had uttered these words as if I were invisible, and here she was again, reinforcing the same disparaging message. My sister's future held paramount importance. Mine did not. My mother departed, leaving me in silent contemplation. I felt Malik's hand find mine beneath the unsteady table. "Are you all right?" he inquired. I was incapable of even forming a response. Just then, the kitchen door swung open with such vehemence that it slammed against the wall behind our table. A young waiter, precariously balancing a massive tray laden with dirty dishes, stumbled, narrowly averting a drenching of Malik in leftover sauce and remnants. With surprising agility, Malik leaned back just in time, and the waiter managed to regain his footing. "Oh my goodness, sir, I am profoundly sorry," the waiter stammered, his face ashen. Malik offered a placid smile. "No harm done, exercise caution with that." I watched the interaction unfold, my hands clenched into tight fists. Even the staff seemed barely aware of our presence. This was beyond mere oversight, it was outright disrespect. The near mishap conjured a cascade of other recollections, instances where I had been relegated to the background for something deemed more significant, invariably linked to Monique. I vividly recalled my own university graduation. I had juggled 2 jobs to complete my teaching program, and I was immensely proud. My parents attended, but they repeatedly consulted their watches throughout the ceremony. They didn't even linger for post-ceremony photographs. "We must depart," my father had stated, already heading towards the exit. "Monique has a networking event with her marketing club, and it's crucial for her future." I stood there in my cap and gown, my diploma clutched in my hand, watching their hasty retreat. "But this is my graduation," I called out to their receding backs. My mother glanced over her shoulder and replied, "We are aware, dear, but this is merely a ceremony. Your sister is building her career. That's how it had always been." When I had approached them for assistance with a down payment on my modest first condominium, they claimed to be financially strained. Mere months later, they co-signed the lease for Monique's brand new luxury convertible, a vehicle more befitting her image as my mother had described it. When I expressed a desire to pursue graduate studies for my master's degree, they advised me to focus on finding a husband rather than accumulating debt. Yet they had recently settled Monique's $20,000 credit card balance, accumulated during what she termed a challenging year. I looked at Malik, who was now patiently wiping a faint smear of sauce from his sleeve. He had consistently been the one person who truly saw me, who valued me, and now he was enduring the same indignity I had experienced my entire life. The clinking of glasses subsided as the illumination in the main ballroom softened. A single spotlight illuminated a small stage that had been entirely invisible from our vantage point. My father, James Sr., stepped to the microphone, his chest visibly puffed with pride. "And now," he announced in a booming voice, "I have the distinct pleasure of introducing the gentleman of the hour, my future son-in-law, and a true titan of industry, the Chief Executive Officer of Apex Innovations, Trevor Hayes." A ripple of polite applause emanated from the unseen assembly. Trevor confidently ascended the stage, a flawless white smile gracing his features. "Thank you, James," he commenced, his voice smooth and practiced. "It is a profound honor to be here, and an even greater privilege to be joining this remarkable family." He proceeded to deliver a speech, and even from our position near the service entrance, the ubiquitous business jargon was audible. He spoke of synergy and disruption. He discussed paradigm shifts and leveraging next-generation solutions. Then he transitioned to the crux of his address. As many of you are aware, Apex Innovations stands on the precipice of something truly revolutionary. We are mere weeks away from finalizing our Series B funding round. This endeavor transcends mere capital. It is about identifying the ideal partners to align with our vision. He was, in essence, fundraising at his own engagement party. I cast a glance at Malik. He had remained entirely silent until this moment, simply observing, his expression unreadable. However, as Trevor continued, Malik slowly withdrew his phone. His face was illuminated by the screen's glow. and his thumbs began to move with a speed and precision that was almost mesmerizing. He was composing a lengthy, detailed message. "Malik, what are you doing?" I whispered, mortified. "Are you texting? People can see us from the main room." He didn't look up, but a subtle, enigmatic smile played on his lips. "It's quite all right, my dear," he murmured back. "I'm merely analyzing some data." He finished typing and pressed send. "This company of his, Apex Innovations," he continued, finally turning his attention to me. "I've reviewed their pitch deck." I was astonished. "What? How did you obtain that?" He took a calm sip of his water. "A colleague of mine in San Francisco forwarded it. He mentioned that Trevor has been disseminating it to every venture capital firm on the West Coast. He's quite desperate for investors." Malik leaned in slightly, his voice barely audible above Trevor's speech. "And Kesha," he said, his smile broadening, "his pitch deck is riddled with inconsistencies. The man is either profoundly misguided or a complete charlatan." Trevor's speech concluded, met with a wave of enthusiastic applause. I could discern my father's voice booming, "Well stated, son," from the main ballroom. A wave of nausea washed over me. Malik simply sat there, observing the proceedings with a calm, almost detached demeanor, as if witnessing a moderately intriguing theatrical performance. I believed the peak of the humiliation had passed, but then I saw Monique detach herself from Trevor's side. She was approaching us, her emerald gown rustling. She was not empty-handed. In her grasp, she held a single dessert plate, piled high with what appeared to be leftovers. She placed the plate onto our unsteady card table, the ceramics impact on the cheap wood echoing in the confined space. "Goodness, the kitchen is just dreadfully slow this evening," she remarked, her voice dripping with the most insincere concern I had ever encountered. "I noticed you two hadn't yet received your main course, so I just managed to scrape this together for you from the main spread. I assumed you must be famished." I stared at the plate. It was a disheveled heap of partially consumed shrimp, a smear of congealed steak sauce, and 2 solitary asparagus spears. It was, quite frankly, refuse. It was precisely what they were serving to the unwanted guests by the kitchen entrance. "You should probably consume it promptly," Monique continued, glancing at her diamond-encrusted timepiece. "The genuine networking segment of the evening is about to commence. All of Trevor's associates will be congregating in the main lounge, and honestly, it would be best if you two simply departed after this." She looked directly at me, her eyes filled with that familiar pity, which felt more akin to corrosive acid. "You wouldn't know anyone, and you'd simply feel out of place. I simply don't want you to be uncomfortable." She was, in essence, banishing her own sister from her party. My hands were trembling so violently that I had to clench them tightly in my lap. I opened my mouth, prepared to articulate something, anything, to erase that smug, self-satisfied expression from her face. But before I could utter a sound, Malik's calm, warm hand covered mine on the table. His grip was firm, restraining me. He looked up at Monique with a small, polite smile. "That is remarkably thoughtful of you, Monique. Thank you." He picked up a fork and casually nudged a piece of shrimp around the plate. "We shall certainly endeavor to remain unobtrusive. We wouldn't want to miss the spectacle." Monique stared at him, visibly irked by his complete lack of visible distress. She had anticipated a reaction. She had expected tears. She received only courteous politeness. With a frustrated little huff, she turned sharply and glided away, returning to the brightness and conviviality of the main room, leaving us once again in the shadows. The party's atmosphere seemed to shift. From our forlorn little table, we could discern Trevor's voice booming from the main ballroom. He was clearly commanding attention, laughing boisterously, intent on impressing. I observed him standing within a tight circle of older gentlemen in immaculate suits. They nodded politely, holding their drinks, their expressions carefully neutral. This was undeniably the networking Monique had so assiduously sought to prevent us from intruding upon. Trevor was in full performance mode, gesturing passionately as he extolled the virtues of his company, Apex Innovations. Then a subtle change occurred. A man within the circle withdrew his phone, his brow furrowing as he read its contents. A moment later, the man beside him replicated the action. It was almost simultaneous, a silent wave of notifications rippling through the very group Trevor was attempting to captivate. The polite smiles on their faces evaporated, replaced by expressions of intense concentration, followed by sharp, worried glances exchanged between them. Trevor, oblivious to this shift, continued his pitch. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why our Series B funding is poised to revolutionize the entire sector. His voice faltered as he finally registered that he had lost his audience. The men were no longer attending to him. They were huddling together, whispering urgently. One of them, a man with distinguished silver hair, shook his head decisively and returned his phone to his pocket. He placed a hand on Trevor's shoulder, a gesture that conveyed more of a dismissal than a congratulation. "An ambitious undertaking, Trevor," he stated. "My colleagues and I need to confer. We must review this new analysis that has just been presented." Trevor's stomach plummeted. New analysis? What analysis? I just provided you with the most up-to-date data. He attempted a laugh, but it sounded strained and unconvincing. The other investors wouldn't even meet his gaze. They were already turning away, forming a tight, anxious cluster near the bar. "Trevor will be in touch," another man declared over his shoulder, a clear indication of their departure. Trevor stood there frozen, his hands still half outstretched. What just happened? He seemed to implore the air. One moment he was the triumphant hero on the verge of securing his $50 million funding round, and the next he was persona non grata. He watched them, his panic escalating. They were whispering, checking their devices, shaking their heads. He was being systematically excluded. He attempted to take a step towards them, but the silver-haired man raised a hand, a definitive gesture to halt him. Trevor turned frantically, scanning the room for Monique, for his future father-in-law, for anyone who could salvage this disaster. From my vantage point by the kitchen, I observed Trevor's carefully constructed composure shatter. He appeared as though he had witnessed a spectre. Just then, my own phone vibrated softly on the unsteady table. I retrieved it. It was a text message from Michael, my lead analyst in San Francisco, who was remotely monitoring the party's guest list. The message was brief. "Target group neutralized. The email from MJ has landed. They're all unnerved. What's the next directive?" A smile touched my lips. I glanced at Keisha, who was watching Trevor with an expression of bewilderment and concern. She still perceived this as a mere family dispute. She had no inkling of the true situation. I typed my reply to Michael, my thumbs moving with practiced ease. "Precisely as orchestrated. Reallocate the full $50 million to Innovate Solutions. I require the term sheet on their desk by morning. They are more deserving." I pressed send. I took a sip of my flat, lukewarm water. It was the most satisfying beverage I had consumed all evening. Trevor's smile remained frozen, a mask of utter confusion. He fumbled for his own phone, his finger slick with a sudden cold sweat. As he unlocked the screen, notifications began to flood in, one after another, striking like hammer blows against a coffin lid. Ping, an email from Sequoia Horizon. Ping, an email from AR Ventures. Ping, Brenner Capital. These were his three most significant prospects, the ones upon which his entire $50 million funding round hinged. He opened the first email. His eyes scanned the text. Dear Trevor, following a thorough review of new risk analyses that have recently come to our attention, we regret to inform you that we will be declining the Series B investment in Apex Innovations. He didn't even have time to draw a breath before clicking the next one. Dear Mr. Hayes, in light of emergent information regarding market viability and internal metrics, AAR Ventures will not be proceeding at this juncture. His heart pounded against his ribs. He opened the third electronic mail. We are respectfully declining this funding round due to significant reservations identified by a credible third-party assessment concerning your user acquisition metrics. All three messages had arrived within the preceding 5 minutes. Each cited a fresh analysis. His future, his enterprise, his entire persona as a captain of industry was unraveling in real time on his handheld device. Monique eventually perceived her fiancé's palpable distress. She glided over, her flawless smile still fixed in place, irritated that he was neglecting his role as the guest of honor. Trevor, my dear, she cooed, her hand brushing his arm. What are you so engrossed in on your phone? You're neglecting our guests. Trevor winced and pulled his arm away, his voice a low growl. Not now, Monique, just leave me be. Monique's smile faltered, replaced by a look of indignation. Pardon me? What did you just say to me? He finally looked at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of panic and fury. Someone is undermining me, he hissed, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of a few nearby attendees. Someone is torpedoing my funding right here, right now, in this very room. He spun around, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his influential guests, desperately seeking the unseen adversary who had just declared war on his existence. He never once directed his attention toward the kitchen entrance. Trevor was frantically assessing the situation, his thoughts racing. Who could it be? Who in this room possessed such formidable influence? His eyes landed on a competitor's chief executive, Mark Thompson. Was it him? He began to approach Thompson, but a firm hand gripped his bicep. It was David, one of his initial investors, and until just 10 minutes prior, a close confidant. David's face was ashen, his eyes wide with unadulterated panic. Trevor, wait, David whispered, pulling him forcefully toward a secluded alcove near the lavatories. You need to be quiet and listen to me. What on earth is happening, David? Trevor hissed, yanking his arm free. My funding round just collapsed. My emails, they all state... David cut him off. I know, I received the same notification. Trevor, you are in catastrophic jeopardy. Do you have any inkling who MJ is? Trevor emitted a nervous, high-pitched scoff. Who is MJ? What kind of inquiry is that? He's the enigma of private equity, the individual who established Onyx Capital. No one knows his identity. No one has ever seen his face. He's a legend. Trevor was speaking rapidly, his fear compelling him to accelerate his speech. They say he can ascertain a company's total valuation within an hour and scuttle a $40 million transaction with a 2-sentence email. What does he have to do with any of this? David leaned in, his voice barely audible. He has everything to do with this, you fool. That new analysis everyone received, that was from him. MJ has personally blacklisted Apex Innovations. Trevor felt the warmth drain from his face, leaving his skin cold and clammy. He's not here. He wouldn't attend events like this. David looked past Trevor, back toward the ballroom, his eyes widening with a dawning horror. I believe that as well, David said, his voice trembling. But it appears he is here. Trevor, MJ is at your engagement party, and apparently you've just offended him. Trevor's blood ran cold. He's here. Where? Who is it? Is it Thompson? I knew I shouldn't have trusted him. He spun around, his eyes frantically scanning the main ballroom, his mind in overdrive. He was searching for a powerhouse, an influential figure he might have overlooked. His gaze swept past the silver-haired venture capitalist, who was now averting his eyes. He observed the local congressman, the president of the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, the chief executive of a rival technology firm. No, he recognized all these individuals. There was no new face, no one sufficiently influential to be the mysterious MJ. "What does he look like?" Trevor demanded, seizing David's arm. "How do you know he's present?" David remained silent. He was staring past Trevor's shoulder, his gaze fixed on a dim corner of the room, an area Trevor hadn't even registered as part of the event. His eyes narrowed, a look of dawning, horrified comprehension spreading across his face. "Trevor," David said slowly, his voice weak, "don't tell me that man over there, the one seated near the service entrance." Trevor turned, following David's gaze. All he could discern was a sad, drooping floral arrangement and a small, unsteady table positioned next to the swinging kitchen door. What about it?" he snapped, his patience extinguished. "That's merely my fiancée's sister and her husband. They're insignificant." David shook his head, his eyes remaining locked on the couple. "The man, the one in the dark suit, no tie. Is he one of your guests?" Trevor finally focused on Malik. He observed a man in a simple suit, calmly sipping water, conversing quietly with his wife. He appeared entirely unremarkable. "That's Malik," Trevor stated with a dismissive scoff. "Malik Jefferson. He's Monique's brother-in-law. He's a teacher or perhaps a data analyst, something of that nature, completely innocuous." Trevor turned back to David, his frustration mounting. "Stop wasting my time. Who is MJ?" David, however, couldn't tear his gaze from Malik. He seemed frozen, as if he had witnessed a phantom. "David, what is wrong with you?" Trevor snapped, his voice escalating into a pitch of panic. "Stop staring at that nobody and help me figure out who is attempting to ruin me." David offered no response. His hand trembled as he retrieved his own phone from his pocket. "That's impossible," David muttered to himself, his fingers flying across the screen. It cannot be." "What cannot be?" Trevor demanded, gripping his friend's shoulder. David ignored him, navigating to a secure link, an internal portal for the Wall Street Journal's highest-tier subscribers. He clicked on an article from the previous year, one Trevor had never encountered. The title read, "The New Game Changers, Private Equity's Phantom Players." David's finger scrolled down, past profiles of well-known billionaires, until it rested on a short, heavily redacted section titled, "The Man Known Only as MJ." "Look," David said, his voice a mere whisper. He held the phone up. Accompanying the text was a single photograph. It was clearly a candid shot taken from a distance at some high-profile conference in Davos. The man in the picture was slightly out of focus, captured in profile, laughing at something off camera. He was wearing a simple dark suit, no tie. It was Malik. There was absolutely no mistaking it. The same calm eyes, the same set of his jaw, the same individual who was presently seated by the kitchen door, patiently sipping water. Trevor stared at the image, his mind struggling to reconcile what his eyes were perceiving. That's just someone who resembles him," Trevor stammered. "It's a blurry photograph." "No, it isn't," David replied, his face ashen. "Read the caption. MJ, the founder of Onyx Capital, seen here in a rare public appearance." David finally turned to meet his friend's gaze, his expression a complex blend of terror and pity. "You imbecile! You complete and utter imbecile! The bride's brother-in-law, the data analyst, is MJ." His face contorted as if the very ground had vanished beneath him. "No," he stammered, glancing from the phone screen to the man by the kitchen door and back again. No, that's impossible. David merely looked at him with a profound pity. Go rectify this immediately. Trevor began to walk, his legs feeling as if they were made of lead. He moved in a daze, pushing past guests, his eyes fixed on the unremarkable little table by the service entrance. Monique, observing his sudden panicked movement, hurried after him, her face a mask of bewilderment. Trevor, darling, where are you going? The networking is in this direction. Her parents, Denise and James Sr., witnessed their daughter and future son-in-law creating a scene and hastened to intervene. They all converged on the table simultaneously. Denise, arriving first, immediately rounded on me. Kesha! She shrieked, her voice sharp enough to pierce glass. What have you done? What did you say to him? I knew you would ruin this. I told you not to cause a scene. But Trevor didn't even notice her. He didn't see Monique, who was tugging at his arm, or James Sr., who was demanding an explanation. His eyes were solely fixated on Malik, who was now calmly standing up as if he had anticipated their arrival. Trevor stopped dead in front of our wobbly table, his entire body trembling. He looked at Malik, the unassuming data analyst, and I watched as a bead of sweat trickled down my future brother-in-law's temple. Mr. Jefferson, Trevor's voice was a strangled whisper. He was shaking. Mr. Jefferson, MJ. My mother and sister froze, their mouths agape. Trevor's hands were clenched at his sides, his face pale. Sir, I am so sorry. I am so deeply sorry. I'm Trevor Hayes from Apex Innovations. I had no idea it was you, sir. I didn't recognize you. The room, which had been alive with polite conversation, fell utterly silent. Even the clatter from the kitchen door seemed to cease. My mother, Denise, and my father, James Sr., stood frozen, their faces etched with complete bewilderment. They had approached to admonish me for creating a spectacle, only to discover their star, their CEO's son-in-law, bowing and stammering like a terrified schoolboy. Monique was the first to regain her voice, and it was shrill with disbelief. Trevor, what are you doing? She shrieked, grabbing his arm. Stop this! What are you talking about, MJ? Who is that? She turned and pointed a diamond-nailed finger directly at Malik. This is Malik. He's a data analyst. He's a nobody. He's a staffer. Malik, who had been observing the unfolding drama with a quiet, almost sad composure, slowly straightened. The easygoing, slightly amused man I had married had vanished. In his stead stood someone I had never before encountered. His shoulders squared, and though he was no taller than my father, he suddenly seemed to command the entire room. The air around him crackled with an authority that silenced everyone, even my mother. He completely ignored Monique, his eyes locked on Trevor with a cold, piercing intensity. Hello, Trevor, he said, his voice soft, yet carrying effortlessly through the silence. I'm glad we finally have the opportunity to speak. I've reviewed your pitch deck for Apex Innovations. Trevor visibly flinched as if struck. You've seen it? Oh, yes, Malik continued, his voice dangerously smooth. It's very ambitious. He paused, letting the word linger in the air. And also deeply fraudulent. You see, I had my team conduct a simple analysis. You've inflated your active user numbers by 40%. 40%? You're not merely ambitious, Trevor. You are a deceiver. The colour drained from Trevor's face. He looked as though he were about to be ill. He opened his mouth, but only a small, choked sound emerged. Sir, please, I can explain. Malik merely shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. He then turned to me, and instantly the powerful, intimidating man disappeared, replaced by my husband. He gently took my hand. Kesha, my love, he said softly, his voice directed at me and me alone. You were correct. It's far too stuffy in here. Let's go home." The string quartet faltered, the music dying with a painful screech. Every single guest in the main ballroom was frozen, their champagne glasses suspended halfway to their lips. Every eye, the investors, the partners, my entire extended family, was laser focused on our pathetic little table by the service entrance. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant, frantic clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Monique looked around, her face a mask of horrified confusion. She didn't comprehend what was transpiring, only that her perfect party had just imploded. She grabbed Trevor's arm, her diamond-nailed fingers digging into his expensive suit. "Trevor," she hissed, her voice cracking. "What did you say? What is going on? Tell me." Trevor, who had been standing there like a statue, finally broke. He ripped his arm from her grasp with a violence that made her stumble backward. He turned to face her, his face no longer pale, but a dark, furious red. His eyes were blazing. "Shut up!" he roared. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom. "Just shut up. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Monique whimpered. I don't." "You don't?" he shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Of course you don't. You were too busy playing the queen." He pointed a shaking finger at Malik, who was now calmly placing his arm around my shoulder. "That man, that nobody, that data analyst you were so proud of hiding by the kitchen." Trevor laughed, a high-pitched, terrifying sound. "That is Malik Jefferson, MJ, the founding partner of Onyx Capital. The man who is so private he's practically a ghost. The man every single investor in this room is terrified of." He clutched his own hair, pulling at it. "He's the man who holds the entire $50 million future of my company in the palm of his hand." Trevor's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "And you, Monique, you, in your infinite wisdom, placed the single most powerful man in American private equity. You placed him by the kitchen door." The echo of Trevor's shout, "Kitchen door!" hung in the air. My father, James Sr., who had been standing frozen by the main stage, finally snapped into action. His face, which had been a mask of pride all evening, was now pale and slick with sweat. He stumbled forward, pushing past a stunned guest, his eyes wide with a new, horrifying realization. He rushed toward Malik, his hands outstretched in a fawning, desperate gesture. Mr. Jefferson," my father stammered, his booming voice now a reedy, nervous tremor. We had no idea. We just thought you were." He couldn't even finish the sentence, couldn't bring himself to utter the dismissive words he had been contemplating moments before. Malik looked at my father. The cold anger in his eyes was terrifying. "You thought I was what, James?" he asked, his voice cutting through the silence. "A nobody, a low-level staffer, as your daughter so eloquently put it." He took a step toward my father, who instinctively recoiled. "You thought I was just some poor data analyst, someone not worthy of sitting at your table, someone who should be grateful for your family's leftover scraps?" My father's mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. The truth was too blunt, too ugly. I just stared at my husband. My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. MJ Onyx Capital, the man who dismantles deals with an email, the man my family had treated with contempt. I finally found my voice, a small, trembling whisper. "Malik," I said, touching his arm. "Onyx Capital, that's your company. You're the intimidating stranger who just eviscerated Trevor Hayes." The persona vanished. Malik turned to me, his expression softening instantly. His eyes filled with the gentle warmth I knew so well. He took both of my hands in his. "Kesha," he said softly, his voice for me and me alone. "I never lied to you. I am a data analyst." He offered a small, sad smile. I just I analyzed the data for entire billion-dollar corporations before Onyx Capital decides whether to acquire them or let them fail. Trevor's words about the $50 million finally pierced through Monique's confusion. Her eyes widened and the color drained from her face. She looked at Trevor, who was standing like a broken statue, his dreams crumbling around him. She recognized that look. It wasn't just anger. It was the expression of a man who had lost everything. And she knew in that instant that she had lost him. His fortune, his status, his future, her future. It was all gone. Her head whipped around, her gaze landing on me. If Trevor was ruined, she was ruined. But if Malik possessed the power to ruin Trevor, he also possessed the power to save him. Her face, which had been frozen in shock, crumpled into a mask of desperate, theatrical panic. "Kesha!" she screamed, lunging forward. She stumbled, her expensive gown tangling around her heels, and she didn't just stumble, she fell. She landed on her knees at my feet, grasping the fabric of my simple dress. Her hands were cold and trembling. The entire room gasped. "Kesha, sister, please," she sobbed, looking up at me, her mascara already beginning to smudge. "You have to help me. You have to tell him to stop. I didn't know. I swear to God, Keisha, I didn't know who he was." She was practically crawling, clinging to my legs. "It was just a joke. I was just teasing you like we always do. It was just a joke." I stared down at her, at my beautiful, perfect sister, kneeling on the dirty floor by the kitchen entrance. This was the moment she had engineered, just not with this outcome. I felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy, just a cold, hard finality. I took a deliberate step back, withdrawing my dress from her grasp. "A joke," I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through her sobs like a knife. "You call this a joke?" I looked around at the silent, watching guests. "You call 20 years of being sidelined, of being told I'm not good enough, of being treated like the family embarrassment. You call that just teasing, Monique?" I looked back down at her. "You seated me next to a kitchen as an insult, and now you're kneeling in the same spot, begging me to salvage your future. The only joke here is you." My sister was still sobbing on the floor, a pathetic, broken heap of emerald green silk. But my mother, Denise, finally emerged from her shock. Her panic was palpable, but it wasn't for me. It was for Monique. It was always for Monique. She saw her perfect daughter's perfect future, the CEO husband, the status, the money evaporating right before her eyes. She stumbled over to me, grabbing my arm, her fingers digging into my skin with bruising force. "Keisha, stop this," she hissed, her eyes wild. "Don't be so petty. This is your sister's future, her entire life. You have to tell your husband to fix this. Tell him to help her." She looked desperately past me at Malik, who was observing this entire scene with a cold, almost academic detachment. "Mr. Jefferson, please," my mother pleaded, shifting her focus, her voice instantly syrupy and false. "You have to help her. We're all family. Tell him, Keisha, we are family." The word family echoed in the silent room. It felt like the final, bitterest insult of the evening. I stared at my mother. This woman who had told me to sit by the kitchen, this woman who had called me a failure my entire life, now using that word as a weapon to achieve her desires. I slowly and deliberately pulled my arm free from her grasp. "Family," I repeated, and my voice was dangerously quiet. "You want to talk about family now, Mum?" The investors were watching, Trevor was watching, my father was watching. I didn't care. "Were we family when you told me my teaching degree was a waste of time and an embarrassment?" I asked, my voice rising only slightly. "Were we family when you skipped my college graduation to attend Monique's networking event? Were we family when you refused to help me with my master's degree, but paid $20,000 for Monique's convertible so she would fit in with Trevor's friends?" My mother's face flushed. That's not. This is different. No, I cut her off. It's precisely the same. You only perceive value in what benefits you and Monique. You never truly saw me at all. I took a step back, finally creating a physical distance between us that mirrored the emotional chasm. You never treated me like family. I was merely the failed daughter. I was the placeholder. I was simply the darkness you used to make Monique shine brighter. So no, I will not tell my husband to help her. You all made this choice. Now you will live with it. Trevor's last vestige of composure had evaporated. He stumbled forward, bypassing Monique, bypassing my parents. His eyes locked onto Malik with a terrifying, desperate intensity. He stopped just short of us, his hands clasped together as if in supplication. Mr. Jefferson, please, he begged, his voice cracking. MJ, sir, I can rectify this, I swear. He was rambling, the words spilling out in a panicked torrent. The numbers my CFO must have. It was an aggressive projection, not fraud. I swear it, we simply rounded up. Apex possesses genuine potential. The technology is sound. Please, he implored. The proud CEO was reduced to a groveling wreck. Don't let a family misunderstanding, a seating arrangement. Don't let this ruin the entire enterprise. I'll do anything. I'm prepared to offer you a larger equity share. I'll concede to your every demand. Just, I implore you, don't let this transaction collapse. Malik, who had been subtly steering me towards the exit, halted his movement. He didn't immediately turn. He simply remained there, his back to Trevor, allowing the man's desperate entreaties to reverberate through the expansive, hushed chamber. Then, with a slow, deliberate, and chilling motion, he turned. His gaze swept over Trevor Hayes, from his frantic, perspiration-beaded face to his expensive, trembling hands. When he finally uttered a word, his tone was devoid of anger. It conveyed something far more ominous. It was absolute. Mr. Hayes, he stated, the formal address dripping with contempt. Onyx Capital adheres to two foundational investment principles, a mere pair. They are remarkably straightforward. Malik took a deliberate step back towards Trevor, who visibly recoiled. Principle number 1, we do not engage with deceivers. Sir, I presented it as a projection, Trevor stammered. It was fraudulent. Malik cut him off, his voice slicing through the air with the sharpness of broken glass. Your user acquisition expenditures are triple what you initially reported. Your customer attrition rate hovers near 60%, a far cry from the 20% you showcased in your presentation. You haven't merely overstated your user figures by 40%, Trevor. You've fabricated them entirely. He let that pronouncement settle. Trevor's complexion drained of all color. If I were to furnish the Securities and Exchange Commission with my team's analysis this very instant, your Series B funding wouldn't just be rejected. You'd face a thorough investigation culminating in a prison sentence. Trevor's face turned a stark, ghastly white. The mere mention of the word prison seemed to steal the last vestiges of air from his lungs. But Malik continued, that's merely the transactional aspect. Our second principle is the one that carries greater weight. He paused, and in that fleeting interval, his eyes flickered towards me, a momentary softening his gaze before hardening again as he refocused on Trevor. Principle number 2, we never partner with individuals exhibiting catastrophic lapses in judgment and character. Trevor appeared bewildered. Character? My board? My references? I'm not referring to your board, Malik clarified. I'm referring to her. He gestured towards Monique, who was now observing them intently, her sobs momentarily suspended. I'm speaking of your selection of a life partner, any man who would construct his future alongside a woman who treats her own sister, her own kin, with such profound cruelty, such utter disdain, such casually venomous disrespect. Malik shook his head, a look of genuine revulsion crossing his features. Any man who would stand idly by and witness his fiancée publicly humiliate a guest, a family member, a woman who has consistently shown nothing but kindness. He directed his gaze pointedly at my sister, then shifted it back to Trevor.
That man is a fool. His judgment is fundamentally untrustworthy, not with my capital and certainly not with anyone else's. Trevor simply stood there, utterly defeated. The game was lost. It was concluded. Therefore, Malik announced, calmly buttoning the lapels of his understated suit jacket, we are declining the investment in Apex Innovations. He then offered a small, chilling smile. And for your information, that $50 million will not be returned to the vault. Trevor looked up, a flicker of pained inquiry in his eyes. Onyx Capital has elected to reallocate that entire $50 million tranche to another promising startup we've been closely observing, a venture named Innovate Solutions. Trevor's eyes widened in disbelief. Innovate? But they are our primary competitor. They are minuscule. They are brilliant, Malik interjected. And unlike your enterprise, their data is authentic. Their technology is demonstrably superior, and they are led by two founders who genuinely respect one another. Malik consulted his watch.
In fact, my team is in the process of finalizing the term sheet with them as we speak. He then delivered the final crushing blow. They are a medical technology firm operating out of Spelman College, established and managed by two remarkably talented young black women, the very caliber of individuals. My wife, the history educator, has been actively mentoring for years. They represent the future, Trevor. You, however, belong to the past. Trevor Hayes emitted a small, strangled sound and visibly wilted. He sank into the nearest armchair, burying his face in his hands. Monique remained motionless, her gaze fixed on the vacant space where her aspirations had once resided. My mother and father stood like stone effigies, their defeat now absolute and complete. Malik then turned to me, his expression softening once more. All traces of anger vanished. He extended his arm. Keisha, he said, his voice imbued with affection, let's go home. I took his arm, and without a backward glance, we exited the ballroom, leaving them amidst the wreckage of their grand affair, stepping out into the refreshing Atlanta evening. Malik and I departed. We didn't flee. We walked hand in hand past the bewildered investors and the astonished friends and family members. We passed the desecrated stage and the drooping, expensive floral arrangements. We were nearing the grand entrance to the ballroom when my father's voice, resonating with a desperate, manufactured authority, brought us to a halt. Keisha, you stop right there. We paused but did not turn. I felt the reassuring pressure of Malik's hand tightening around mine. You cannot simply depart like this, my father, James Sr., declared, hurrying to obstruct our path. He positioned himself directly in front of us, his face flushed, his eyes filled with an earnest plea. You cannot do this family. I finally turned to face him. I looked at this man who had lauded my sister as a titan of industry while overlooking my own achievements. This man who valued Trevor's fabricated success above my own quiet existence. This family? I inquired, my voice cutting through the air cold and clear. This family ceased to exist for me a long time ago, Dad. Don't be melodramatic, he sputtered, reverting to a familial script. We're having a minor disagreement, that's all. We can resolve this. No, I stated, shaking my head resolutely. You cannot resolve this. I tried. I dedicated my entire life to trying. I strived to be intelligent enough, subdued enough, inconspicuous enough. I aspired to make you proud, but you never even acknowledged my presence. I gestured back towards the opulent room, towards Monique, who was now being half supported from the floor by Trevor, and towards my mother, who was simply gazing into the distance, utterly broken. You don't care about family, I declared, locking eyes with him. You care about wealth. You care about social standing. You care about public perception. I met his gaze directly. Well, now you can see, Dad. My husband, the data analyst you are so unwilling to have at your table, possesses more wealth and a higher social standing than anyone present in this entire venue. I looked past him towards my mother, who was observing our exchange with vacant, lifeless eyes. You've achieved your objectives. You've finally secured your CEO's son-in-law, even if he's a charlatan, and you have your impeccable daughter. A faint, bitter smile touched my lips. I trust you all thoroughly enjoyed the celebration. I didn't wait for a response. I simply sidestepped my father, who stood there in stunned silence, and walked out the door with my husband. As Malik and I emerged from the private dining chamber, an absolute silence descended upon the grand ballroom. The string quartet had ceased their performance, their bows poised precariously above their instruments. Every single guest, all 150 of them, the investors, the business associates, the long-standing family friends, stood frozen, their gazes fixed upon us. They had overheard everything, the raised voices, the accusations of financial impropriety, the devastating finality in Malik's pronouncements. The doors leading to the kitchen where we had been sequestered had inadvertently acted as an amplification system, projecting our intimate family conflict onto the main event. The hushed whispers began instantly, spreading like wildfire through dry foliage. I observed the distinguished silver-haired venture capitalist, the very individual who had initially dismissed Trevor, lean towards his colleague and murmur something. Both men shook their heads and, without a word to my parents, turned and proceeded decisively towards the exit. A further contingent of investors swiftly followed their lead. The soiree was irrevocably concluded. The networking event of the season had devolved into a career-ending catastrophe in under 10 minutes. I cast one final glance back. Trevor Hayes, the once proud CEO, had slumped into a chair near the untouched celebratory cake. His head was buried in his hands, his frame racked with tremors. Monique lay on the floor, her emerald green gown pooling around her, emitting heart-wrenching wails. My mother and father stood beside her, resembling unmoving statues, their faces ashen and hollow as they witnessed their meticulously constructed world disintegrate before their eyes. They didn't even register our departure. Malik placed his arm around my waist, his touch a comforting and protective anchor. He guided me across the vast expanse of the ballroom floor. We proceeded directly past the elevated platform where Trevor had delivered his arrogant address. We walked past the imposing ice sculpture of a swan, which was now beginning to liquefy under the intense illumination. The remaining attendees parted to allow us passage, their eyes wide with a mixture of sympathy and a morbid fascination. The music abruptly resumed, a nervous, frenetic melody from the string quartet, a desperate attempt to feign normalcy, but it was in vain. Malik and I were the only two individuals in that entire assembly who were smiling. We reached the main portals, pushed them open, and stepped out into the cool, unblemished night air, leaving the shattered remnants of my family's aspirations behind us. The heavy door of the hotel swung shut behind us, muffling the sounds of my sister's piercing screams and my mother's hysterical sobs. The profound silence of the grand, empty hallway was overwhelming. I was trembling not from the chill, but from the potent adrenaline surge of the past 20 minutes. Malik's arm remained a steadfast presence around my waist, guiding me towards the private elevator. We exchanged no words. None were necessary. We descended to the subterranean parking facility, a domain I had never previously entered. A long, sleek, impossibly sophisticated black automobile awaited, a chauffeur standing respectfully by the open rear door. It resembled a Maybach. "Malik," I whispered, my voice husky. "Whose vehicle is this?" "It's ours, Kesha," he responded gently, assisting me into the luxurious interior. "Well, it's one of the company's." The door closed with a heavy, sound-dampening thud. The pandemonium of the party, my family, my past, it all receded into oblivion. It was just the two of us, enveloped in supple leather and polished wood, gliding silently from the garage and into the Atlanta night. I gazed intently at my husband, the man I had married 3 years prior, the man I believed I knew intimately. "You're him," I finally articulated, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "You're MJ, the individual everyone else feared." Malik loosened his suit jacket and exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He appeared weary. "I am," he confirmed quietly. He turned to face me, his eyes conveying an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. "Regret. Kesha, I am profoundly sorry. I never, under any circumstances, intended for you to discover this truth in such a manner, not amidst the chaos of that event." I shook my head, struggling to comprehend his words. "But why? Why wouldn't you disclose this to me? We are married. You allowed me to believe. You allowed my family." My voice faltered. "You permitted them to treat you in such a fashion." "Yes," he affirmed, his voice resolute. "I did because I needed to observe. I needed to ascertain their true natures. But me? Why did you not inform me?" He gently took my hands. His were warm and steady. "Keisha, do you have any conception of what it is like to be MJ? Prior to meeting you, I hadn't engaged in a genuine conversation in 5 years. Every individual I encountered, every woman I dated, was not seeing me. They were fixated on Onyx Capital. They perceived a walking, talking dollar sign. They chuckled at jokes that lacked any humor. They readily concurred with opinions I didn't even genuinely hold. It was an experience of profound isolation." He gazed out the window at the city lights blurring past. "And then I encountered you at that alumni fundraiser. You were a history educator. You spoke with such passion about your students, about your dedication to bringing the past to life for them. You inquired about my profession, and I offered my standard, deliberately vague response. I work in finance, and you accepted it without question. You didn't ask about my earnings. You didn't inquire about the company. You asked me what I was currently reading." He turned back to me, his eyes holding an intense focus. "I fell irrevocably in love with you that evening, Kesha. I fell in love with you because you perceived Malik, not MJ. You were the sole individual in my life who felt authentic. I was so consumed by the fear that if I revealed the truth, you would fundamentally change, that you would begin to view me differently, like everyone else." Tears welled in my eyes. "So you deliberately allowed me to continue believing you were simply ordinary. You let me pay for half our meals during our initial dates. You allowed me to worry about our financial budget." "I cherished it," he said, accompanied by a brief, genuine laugh. "I relished your concerns. I adored your habit of seeking out coupons. I loved it when you'd suggest, 'Let's just stay in tonight, it's more economical.' You genuinely meant it. You have no inkling how exceptionally rare that is." His demeanor grew serious once more. "I was going to tell you, I give you my word. I was merely awaiting the opportune moment. However, your family, they hastened the entire process. I could no longer bear to stand by and permit them to treat you in such a manner for even another second." I processed this revelation, all the subtle clues. his business trips, that were in reality board meetings held in Zurich, his aging laptop that was undoubtedly a secure server, his acquaintances in the technology sector who were, in fact, the chief executive officers of companies he had financed. My mother, I whispered, the sting of humiliation still fresh. She referred to you as a low-level data analyst. Malik actually let out a hearty laugh. She wasn't entirely inaccurate. You see, my entire profession involves the analysis of data. I simply analyze the data that determines whether a multi-billion-dollar enterprise is constructed upon a bedrock of deception, like Trevor's, or upon a foundation of sheer genius. He smiled. So yes, I am indeed a data analyst. I shook my head, a new disorienting reality beginning to solidify. So for all this time, you've simply been observing my family treat me like the failure, the coupon-clipping penny pincher, the inconsequential history teacher. Yes, he confirmed, and I have never been more proud of you than I was in those very moments. You navigated their cruelty with a dignity they will never comprehend. You never stooped to their level, you simply persevered. But Kesha, he continued, his tone shifting slightly, that's the other crucial piece of information I must impart to you. He reached for his briefcase, which rested on the seat beside him. It was a worn, unpretentious leather bag I had seen countless times. He opened it and withdrew a file. I wasn't merely observing you, my dearest. I was studying you. What does that signify? I inquired. He handed me a thick-bound document. I examined the cover. It was my master's thesis, the one I had completed 6 years prior. Historical Parallels in Modern Urban Education Policy, a socio-economic analysis. My family had derisively labelled it the most tedious document ever produced, questioning why I couldn't have pursued a simpler teaching certification. I have perused this, Malik stated, his voice filled with a renewed energy. Approximately 5 times. It is nothing short of brilliant. Malik, it's a history paper. No, he interrupted, his voice resonating with an entirely new vitality. It is a blueprint. Kesha, do you recall that evening when you spoke so passionately about your students? About how the current curriculum fails to address the systemic obstacles they encounter? About how technology could serve as a bridge if only it were applied with a deep understanding of historical context? I suppose, I stammered, remembering a night filled with animated discussion over a bottle of inexpensive wine. I was merely expressing myself. You are innovating, he declared. Onyx Capital possesses a non-profit foundation. It functions as our social impact initiative. Its current valuation stands at $500 million. For the past year, I have been actively seeking an individual to lead this endeavor. Someone who doesn't compartmentalize technology and education into discrete categories. Someone who understands, as you do, that one cannot forge a successful future without a profound comprehension of the past. I simply stared at him, my mind struggling to bridge the immense gap. Kesha, he said, gently taking my hands once more. I do not require another Stanford MBA whose vocabulary consists solely of industry buzzwords. I need someone who comprehends the real-world applicability of this technology, someone possessing your expertise, your unwavering passion, and your profound empathy. Your family, he continued, they perceive a history educator as a failure. However, I view your accumulated experience as the single most valuable asset we could possibly acquire. He smiled, his eyes alight with brilliance. How would you feel about assuming leadership of the Onyx Social Impact and Education Fund with the title of Executive Vice President? I was rendered speechless. I looked from his face to the thesis resting in my lap, and then back to his face. All those years I had harbored the persistent feeling of being a failure. For years, my family had consistently informed me that my passion for history was futile, impractical, a dead end pursuit. And all this time, the man I loved, the secret billionaire I adored, wasn't merely tolerating my monotonous discourses on educational policy. He was, in essence, conducting an extended interview. Finally, I managed to articulate a response, tears now flowing not from humiliation, but from a deep, world altering sense of validation. My teaching career was my experience. It was your superpower. Malik affirmed, Onyx possesses the capacity to employ 1,000 data analysts. We can only locate one individual like you. So, what is your decision, Madam Vice President? It had been 3 days since the spectacularly disastrous engagement celebration. I found myself seated in our living room, a space I now understood to be an expansive penthouse, offering panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline. What I had consistently perceived as Malik's ordinary apartment was, in reality, a luxurious 3,000 square foot expanse of glass and steel. The understated, tasteful furnishings I had helped select were, as I was now discovering, quietly priceless. I was enveloped in a cashmere blanket, savouring a cup of coffee from a mug that likely cost more than my former sofa, and perusing the news on my tablet. I didn't need to actively search for the articles, they were omnipresent. The initial headline, prominently displayed in the Wall Street Journal, read, Apex Innovations scraps. IPO plans faces SEC investigation after funding collapse. My fingers trembled slightly as I tapped the screen. The article detailed how Trevor Hayes' much anticipated Series B funding round had disintegrated overnight. It cited anonymous sources, the same investors who had abruptly departed the party, stating that a last-minute, highly damaging risk analysis had been disseminated by Onyx Capital. The report, allegedly authored by the fund's reclusive founder, MJ, purportedly highlighted gross inflation of user metrics and fundamental deficiencies in the technology's architectural integrity. The Securities and Exchange Commission had already initiated a formal inquiry into Apex for its alleged misrepresentation to investors. Trevor's carefully constructed house of cards, as Malik had aptly termed it, had indeed collapsed. I scrolled down, a knot forming in my stomach. I derived no satisfaction from this outcome. It was merely a somber, predictable consequence. I swiped to the local society pages. A distinctly different category of headline appeared, yet no less severe in its implications. Atlanta's power couple's engagement collapses. Trevor Hayes and Monique, last name omitted, postpone wedding indefinitely. I clicked on this article as well. The tone was heavily laden with thinly veiled gossip. It chronicled the abrupt and shocking dissolution of the engagement. It mentioned that Trevor Hayes had departed the city to address the sudden volatility within his business affairs. Monique was described as being utterly devastated and in a state of seclusion at our parents' residence. The article made no mention of us, nor of the kitchen table incident, nor of the dramatic scene that had unfolded. It was unnecessary. The implicit message was clear. The magnificent social gathering had culminated in a spectacular and humiliating failure. Trevor, confronted with financial ruin and public exposure, had opted to cut his losses, leaving my sister, who had meticulously constructed her entire identity around securing this perfect partner, with absolutely nothing. I was seated on the terrace of our penthouse, the very penthouse I had mistakenly believed to be a standard apartment for the past 3 years. I was engrossed in reading the news articles on my tablet when my phone began to ring. The caller ID simply displayed Mother. I hadn't received any communication from her since that fateful night. I let it ring, my gaze fixed on the sprawling Atlanta skyline, the insistent buzzing sound a stark contrast to the quiet morning air. It stopped, only to immediately recommence, this time with frantic urgency. I took a slow sip of my coffee and finally answered. I remained silent, simply waiting. Kesha! Her voice was a high-pitched, piercing wail. It was a sound I had never before heard emanating from her. The sound of pure, unadulterated panic. Keisha, thank goodness you answered. You absolutely must come home. You need to come home right this instant. The family is falling apart. I surveyed the cityscape before me. I am home, Mum. What is it you require? No, not that place. She spat out the words, the familiar venom mingling with her newfound hysteria. You have to come to our house. Your sister... Oh, Kesha, your poor sister, it's Trevor. He abandoned her, he called off the wedding, he sent her a text message. Kesha. A text message. Can you even fathom the audacity of that man? After everything she did for him, after that exquisite, flawless party. I waited. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken tension. What does that have to do with me? I finally inquired. What does it have to do with you? She shrieked, her voice cracking with emotion. This is your fault. He left her because of what your husband did, because you disgraced him. Monique hasn't eaten in 2 days. She's confined herself to her room and refuses to emerge. She declared her existence finished, that nothing remained for her. I remained silent. I reflected on the plate of remnants Monique had brought me. He destroyed her, my mother wailed. Trevor did not destroy her, Mum, I countered, my voice even and quiet. Trevor was a charlatan. He misled all of you. He deceived his investors. He was destined to fail regardless of our involvement. That is irrelevant, she shrieked. He represented her future and now it is all gone. And that is not even the most distressing part. Your father, O Keisha, your unfortunate father, his associates, the individuals present at the gathering, they are withdrawing their support. 2 of his most significant clients terminated their agreements this morning. They stated their inability to conduct business with someone exhibiting such poor judgment and familial turmoil. Your father will forfeit his company, the enterprise he dedicated 30 years to constructing. We will lose our residence. We will lose everything. Her voice descended, transforming into a low, malevolent accusation. This is precisely what you desired, is it not? You and your spouse. You attended that event with the intention of ruining us. You engineered this situation. I allowed her accusations to linger in the air. I contemplated the unsteady table, the paper serviette, the sound emanating from the kitchen door. Mom, I said, my voice so composed, so frigid that it immediately ceased her weeping. I am not dismantling anything. What? She stammered. I stated I am not destroying your family. You are, you, Dad, and Monique. You orchestrated this predicament yourselves. You have dedicated my entire existence to venerating 2 things, prestige and wealth. You were indifferent to Trevor's arrogant deceit. Your sole concern was that he held the position of CEO. You gambled your entire family's future upon him. How could you possibly? She whispered, the indignation replaced by astonishment. You placed your faith in a swindler, I continued, rising and advancing to the edge of the terrace. And in doing so, you insulted, humiliated, and discarded the one individual in that entire assembly who possessed the actual capacity to rescue you. You did not bet on Malik. You bet against him. You gambled against me, and you lost. Kesha, please, you fail to grasp the situation. We are your family. No, Mum, I stated, finally allowing the stark, unvarnished reality to settle between us. For the first time, you do not understand. You are incapable of rectifying this. I am incapable of rectifying this. Malik will not rectify this. These are the ramifications of your own decisions. Goodbye. I terminated the call. I blocked her number and returned to my coffee. I had presumed that severing communication with my mother would bring me serenity, but I had overlooked my sister. The subsequent afternoon, my telephone vibrated with a notification I had been anticipating with dread. One new voicemail from Monique. I gazed at the screen, my thumb poised above the delete icon. I had no desire to listen. I did not wish to hear her voice, her justifications, her recriminations. Yet, a small, persistent fragment of me, the part that still recalled the younger sister with whom I once played before she learned to resent me, initiated playback. Her voice filled the room, but it was devoid of the sharp, assured, derisive tone I recognized. It was a fractured, gasping, desperate sound. "Kesha!" she sobbed, the sound thick and choked. "Kesha, it's me. Please, please, I understand your animosity. I truly do. But kindly listen." I heard her take a ragged inhalation. I apologize, all right. I am profoundly, deeply sorry. I was mistaken. I behaved deplorably towards you. I was merely. Her voice fractured again. I simply aspired to lead a fulfilling life. You know, as Mother consistently advised, I merely wished to achieve success. The weeping persisted for several moments. "He is gone, Kesha. Trevor has departed. He is not responding to my calls. He postponed the wedding. He stated that I had ruined him, that my family had ruined him, everything. It is all lost." Then her tone shifted. A nascent, desperate hope began to emerge. But you can salvage this. But you are capable, I know you are. Your husband, Malik, he orchestrated all of this for you. He will heed your words. He cherishes you. I could discern her mounting desperation. "Please, Keisha, I implore you as your sister. Kindly ask him, request that he grant Trevor another opportunity. Just one more chance. Trevor can revitalize the company. I am certain he possesses the capability. He is intelligent. Please, I still love him, Keisha. I cannot bear to lose him. I adore him immensely." The message concluded with another ragged sob. I remained seated in the tranquil penthouse. The sole auditory sensation was the faint hum of the metropolis below. I listened to the word love reverberate in my consciousness. I contemplated Monique, who had never once inquired about my life, who had regarded my husband with nothing but scorn, who had contentedly relegated us to the kitchen. I slowly shook my head. "No, Monique," I murmured to the silent receiver. "Your affection is not for him. You covet his status. You desire his wealth. You cherish the illusion of being Mrs. CEO. I understood my sister. She was not mourning the man. She was lamenting the life she had forfeited, the life she had constructed upon a foundation of arrogance and cruelty. My digit moved across the screen. I experienced no ire. I felt no commiseration. I simply felt resolved. I pressed delete. The voicemail and the final vestige of my connection to her vanished. 6 months. That was the duration since the engagement celebration. 6 months since my life had been shattered and subsequently reconstituted into something I could never have envisioned. I stood at the head of an elongated, polished marble table in the boardroom on the 50th floor of the Onyx Capitol building. The Atlanta cityscape unfurled behind me, a glittering testament to a realm I was only beginning to comprehend. I was no longer Keisha, the unsuccessful history instructor. I was Keisha Jefferson, Executive Vice President of the Onyx Social Impact Fund. The room was populated by university presidents, community organizers, and technological innovators. They all regarded me, awaiting my discourse. I was attired in a meticulously tailored navy blue suit, my hair professionally coiffed. I experienced a profound, quiet self-assurance I had never before possessed. The woman who had been concealed behind the kitchen door was gone. In her stead stood a woman who commanded the room. I smiled and touched the screen, bringing my presentation to life. "Good morning, esteemed colleagues," I declared, my voice clear and unwavering. "It is with immense pleasure that I present our fund's premier initiative for the forthcoming fiscal year." I navigated to the subsequent slide. It displayed the iconic emblems of Spelman College, Morehouse College, Howard University, and Hampton University. "I am proposing the Onyx Legacy Grant," I proclaimed, announcing a commitment of $100 million to be dispersed over the ensuing 5 years for the purpose of establishing new technology centres and digital historical archives at our nation's preeminent historically black colleges and universities. A wave of impressed murmurs permeated the chamber. I elucidated the strategy, the analytical data, the anticipated outcomes. I spoke with ardent conviction regarding the imperative of safeguarding our heritage in order to forge an equitable future. As I articulated my points, I could not refrain from contemplating my family. I thought of my mother, who had derided my seemingly inconsequential history degree. I recalled my father, who had asserted that genuine accomplishment resided in commerce, not in antiquated volumes. They were profoundly mistaken. My history degree was precisely the reason Malik had insisted I assume this role. He had articulated, Onyx Capital possessed numerous financial analysts, but what they required was an individual with a discerning soul, someone who understood that one cannot construct a new future without first comprehending, preserving, and honouring the past. My family had perceived my passion as a deficiency. My husband regarded it as my exceptional strength. I observed the nodding, engaged countenances of the board members. "We are convinced," I concluded, "that investing in these institutions is not merely an act of benevolence. It represents the most astute investment in the future that we possibly could undertake." The room erupted in immediate enthusiastic applause. It was not the perfunctory, forced approbation of a familial gathering. It was genuine respect. I had discovered my purpose. The very knowledge that my family had disdained was now the instrument I employed to reshape the world. It was a balmy evening in late autumn, nearly a year since the engagement ceremony. Malik and I were commemorating. The Onyx Legacy Grant had been formally unveiled, and the media coverage was overwhelmingly favorable. Furthermore, Innovate Solutions, the enterprise he had financed in lieu of Trevor's, had just introduced a groundbreaking medical device, validating his confidence in them. "To you, Madame Vice President," Malik proposed, raising his glass. We were at a recently established, highly recommended French establishment downtown, one I had harbored a desire to patronize. The ambiance was intimate, characterized by subdued lighting and soft melodies. I reciprocated his toast. "And to you, MJ, for perceiving potential where no one else did." We shared a laugh, a synchronized, effortless sound. I experienced complete tranquility, contentment. I was no longer the woman concealed by the kitchen door. I occupied the precise position I was destined for. I took a sip of my wine and surveyed the elegant surroundings, appreciating the aesthetic. My gaze swept past a couple celebrating an anniversary, past a table of business executives, and then I froze. Standing near a service station, meticulously polishing cutlery, was a woman attired in a black and white server's uniform. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, unflattering chignon. Her complexion was pallid and she appeared utterly fatigued. It was Monique, my sister. I struggled to draw breath. Malik immediately detected my alteration in expression. "Keisha, what is amiss?" I offered only the slightest nod in Monique's direction. Malik turned, his countenance remained unchanged, but his eyes hardened. It was the ultimate bitter irony. The woman who had scorned us for our perceived insignificance. The woman who had banished her own sister to the periphery by the kitchen door, deeming her insufficiently important, was now clearing soiled plates and replenishing water glasses for remuneration. I observed as the restaurant manager addressed her with sharp words. Monique simply inclined her head, her gaze lowered. Yes, sir, immediately. She bore no resemblance to the favoured child adorned in a diamond-encrusted gown. She simply appeared weary. As she turned to retrieve a water pitcher, her eyes swept across the dining room and met mine. For a full 3 seconds we maintained eye contact. I detected a flicker of recognition in her gaze, followed by pure, unadulterated astonishment, which rapidly dissolved into a surge of profound, searing humiliation. Her face flushed a deep crimson. She could not have averted her gaze more swiftly. She dropped the silverware she was holding, a clatter of spoons and forks descending to the floor. Apologies, my apologies, she stammered, fumbling to retrieve them, her back pointedly turned towards our table. She never again glanced in our direction. She spent the remainder of the evening keeping to the shadows, her movements swift and furtive, ensuring she remained on the opposite side of the establishment. Malik gently clasped my hand. Would you prefer to depart? He inquired softly. I pondered for a moment. The former Kesha would have. The former Kesha would have retreated, feeling embarrassed for her or perhaps apprehensive of a confrontation. But I was no longer the former Kesha. I felt nothing, not pity, not satisfaction, not even anger, merely a profound, quiet detachment. She was no longer my concern. She was no longer an element of my narrative. No, I declared, turning back to my husband and raising my wineglass. I am precisely where I am meant to be. I took a sip. This wine is exceptional. Let us procure another bottle to commemorate. I did not avert my gaze in her direction again. I simply continued my repast, my attention fixed upon my husband and our shared future. It had been nearly 2 years. 2 years since the engagement ceremony that had detonated my existence and, in doing so, had ultimately preserved it. My work at the Onyx Social Impact Fund had become my life's consuming passion. We were financing educational and technological initiatives in underserved communities, and the endeavour was more fulfilling than my quiet existence as a history instructor had ever been. However, I had not seen my parents since that pivotal day. Following the public disgrace, the collapse of their financial standing, and Monique's departure, they had vanished. They had vacated their expansive residence, divested themselves of their assets, and, to my knowledge, were residing in a modest condominium on the opposite side of the city. I had never received an apology and had never anticipated one. Then my assistant's voice emanated from my intercom. Her tone was hesitant, tinged with confusion. Mrs. Jefferson, you have some visitors. They claim to be your parents. They do not have an appointment. I reclined in my chair, the leather creaking within the spacious, hushed office. I gazed out the floor-to-ceiling window at the panoramic Atlanta skyline. So the day had finally arrived. Kindly usher them in, Chloe, I instructed, my voice perfectly level. I arose not as a gesture of hospitality, but to establish parity. I walked to the window, my back to the entrance, awaiting their arrival. I heard the door open, then close softly. I detected 2 sets of footsteps, tentative and slow, ceasing several feet behind me. They did not resemble the assured, heavy tread of my father or the sharp, judgmental click of my mother's heels. Finally, I turned. The 2 individuals standing in my office were strangers. They appeared as spectres. My father, James Sr., was a man I recalled as being imposing and substantial, his presence filling every room. The man before me was diminutive. He was slender, and his shoulders were slumped in a manner I had never witnessed. He was clad in a simple, slightly frayed polo shirt and trousers that appeared too large for his newly diminished frame. The arrogant authority that had defined my entire childhood had dissipated. My mother, Denise, was unrecognizable. Her perfectly highlighted blonde coiffure was now entirely grey, styled in a simple, practical fashion. The designer attire was gone, replaced by a modest knit dress that seemed procured from a department store during a sale. She clutched her handbag to her chest as if it were a flotation device. Both of them appeared aged. They appeared exhausted. They appeared utterly vanquished, standing disoriented in the center of my expansive contemporary office, intimidated by the very symbols of success they had so fervently idolized throughout their lives. My father was the first to speak, his voice rough and unfamiliar. Keisha, your office, it is quite impressive. It was a feeble, awkward attempt at superficial conversation. The ensuing silence was heavy. I did not facilitate him. I did not offer them seating. I simply waited. He cleared his throat, his gaze fixed upon the floor, then upon my mother, and finally upon me. We are here to express our apologies, he stated. The words emerged in a pained, arduous rush, as if their utterance inflicted physical discomfort upon him. Keisha, we were mistaken. We were profoundly, profoundly wrong about everything. My mother simply stared at the floor, her shoulders trembling silently. It took considerable effort for them to see. My father continued, his voice faltering. The business, it is gone. After those investors withdrew at the party, the bank called in our loans. We were unable to recuperate. We lost the house. He finally raised his gaze to meet mine, his eyes pleading. I was blinded, Keisha. Blinded by status, by Trevor, by Monique. I was so fixated on what I perceived as success that I failed to see. I did not see you. My mother finally spoke, her voice a raspy whisper I barely recognized. We have lost Monique as well. After Trevor's company collapsed, after the SEC investigation commenced, she blamed us. She asserted that we had pressured her. She relocated to Texas. She does not return our calls. We are entirely alone. Her face contorted and she emitted a faint sob. Keisha, please, we have forfeited everything. We are so very sorry. Can we simply commence anew? Please, can we be a family once more? The question hung suspended in the air. This was the juncture I had envisioned for 20 years. The moment my parents would finally acknowledge me, finally offer their apologies, finally confess their error. And now that it had materialized, I did not experience the triumph I had anticipated. I felt no rage. I experienced only a deep, profound, and quiet sorrow. I contemplated the young girl hiding beside the kitchen door. I reflected upon the young woman who had wept herself to sleep after being informed her degree was a waste. I inhaled deeply. I forgive you. The words escaped my lips, and I realized with a slight shock that I genuinely meant them. My mother released a gasp of relief, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Oh, Keisha, thank heavens, thank... I raised my hand, halting her. Allow me to finish, I stated, my voice gentle yet resolute. I am not granting forgiveness because you merit it. I am not forgiving you because you are my parents. I regarded them, these two broken individuals. I am forgiving you because I merit peace. I have concluded my anger. I have ceased carrying your errors, your prejudice, and your blindness. I am finished. I returned to my desk and took my seat, not as their daughter, but as the woman I had evolved into. But commencing anew? I shook my head. No, that is an impossibility. The family you refer to, the one where I was the failure and Monique was the favored child, that family is deceased, and frankly, it ought to have perished a considerable time ago. Just as my mother began to voice an objection, the door to my office opened softly, and Malik entered. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee, precisely as he did every afternoon. He had not used the intercom. He possessed his own key. He observed my parents and paused. His expression immediately became impassive, his gaze protective as it settled upon me. "Am I interrupting?" he inquired, his eyes seeking mine. "No," I responded, offering him a small, warm smile. "You are precisely on time." He approached and stood beside my chair, placing a coffee on my desk and a comforting, strong hand on my shoulder. He offered a polite nod to my parents, but remained silent. They observed him, the easy intimacy between us, the unspoken, unshakable partnership. This was the man they had relegated to the kitchen door, and now he clearly belonged here, while they were the interlopers. I turned my attention back to my parents. "I cannot commence anew with you," I stated, "because I already possess a family, a genuine one." I placed my hand over Malik's. "A family built upon trust, a family constructed on respect, a family that perceives me and values me for precisely who I am." My father lowered his gaze, vanquished. We understand," he said quietly. "We shall depart. We simply wished for you to know that we are contrite." They appeared so lost, so utterly adrift, and in that moment I recognized what I was compelled to do. "Wait," I said. They paused at the doorway. "I will not permit you to be destitute. That is not my nature. That is not who we are." I looked at Malik and he nodded, already comprehending my intention. "I have instructed my financial team," I stated, my voice firm but not unkind. "I am establishing a modest, anonymous pension for you. It will suffice to secure a comfortable apartment in a secure locale and cover your living expenses. It will be administered by the fund, not by me." My mother began to weep again, this time with what appeared to be genuine gratitude. "Kesha, we cannot impose." "You are not imposing," I interrupted. "I am informing you, and I wish for you to understand that this is not a gift. It is a boundary. It ensures you will have your necessities met, and it guarantees that you will never have a financial impetus to seek me out again. That dynamic, the one where you wield support as leverage over me, it is concluded forever." I stood and escorted them to the door. "Our relationship, if indeed we are to have one, will operate under new parameters. It will be founded on candor, it will be on my schedule, and you will accord me and my husband the respect we both merit. You will never ever disrespect Malik again. Is that understood?" My father, humbled, finally met my gaze, truly looked at me, and he nodded. "Yes, Kesha, we understand. Thank you." They departed. I watched them walk down the long modern corridor of the Onyx Capitol building. Two small grey figures from a past I was finally truly relinquishing. The door clicked shut. I exhaled a breath that felt as though I had been holding it for my entire life. Malik's arms encircled me from behind, his chin resting upon my head. "Are you well, Madam Vice President?" he whispered into my hair. I leaned back against him, closing my eyes, experiencing the fortitude of the man who had seen me when I was invisible. "I am free, I am now," I declared. "Let us go home." But here is the lesson we can glean. This narrative illustrates that our intrinsic worth is never defined by those who endeavor to diminish us, even if they are our own kin. Kesha was labeled a failure, yet she quietly cultivated a life of purpose and integrity. Her family, consumed by their pursuit of status, failed to recognize her true value and were blinded by their own inherent biases. Genuine power doesn't stem from conforming to another's restrictive standards of accomplishment. It resides in recognizing your intrinsic value, irrespective of external validation. Ultimately, integrity and personal ethics are the sole enduring possessions. Have you experienced being undervalued by your relatives, only to demonstrate their misjudgment? We invite you to share your experiences in the section provided.